Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome back to 340 Live. Today we are talking about nutrition and supplements. As always, I am 340 Paddler, also known as Chris Lidke. I have 7 finishes in the 340, and I'm joined by a panel of very well qualified people to speak to nutrition and supplementation. First of all, we have Asbjorn, Ozzy, Larsen, known for his ultra running. He's done a lot of that before he came into ultra paddling. He's got finishes in the 340 in 2018 and 2020. Then we have the man who could probably replace me because he has a better radio voice than I could ever hope for. Yes, we have the 2019 winner of the 340, or half of the 2019 winning team from the 340, Jeremy Vore, coming to us from the UP of Michigan. It actually exists. I thought it was like Wyoming, Italian for nothing actually exists here. It's sort of a space holder, but apparently I was wrong. And finally, we have the man, the myth, the legend, and we have Bryan Hopkins. Bryan finished the first 340. He took second place. We won't talk about the fact that he was 20 hours behind West, but he has about 8 finishes, including in mixed tandem, men's solo, tandem, and other groups. And he is joined by Alma, who is I'm going to mess this up, a registered dietitian.
That's right.
So has a lot of qualifications when it comes to nutrition. So welcome, panel. Then just a reminder of how this works. We do have the Q&A section, which is open. It is available on Zoom. You can type in your questions. I will see them as we're running through things. If there's a question very similar to what we're talking about, I will bring it up. Otherwise, we will deal with them towards the end. You can also use the chat feature, and if you're on YouTube, you can use the chat, and our man in the background, Steve Schneer, the happiest man in Missouri, will help move those things over for us. Otherwise, again, we are dealing with nutrition and supplementation, something that we deal with on a regular basis on the 340. And before we jump into sort of how it works and what's in the food bag, I just want to say one of the best things you can do is put together your food bags ahead of time, not this far ahead of time. This is not a real food bag. Put a name on it, your name if you're self-supported and leaving it by a flag, but also for your ground crew, the checkpoint where they need to grab it. So all they have to think about is, where am I? What bag am I grabbing and handing to them? So sort of organization that'll help you out moving along. But let's start at the beginning. Ozzy, what is in your food bag?
In my food bag is mostly for taste. I am one of those that uses a powdered sports drink for pretty much all my race, but in my food bag for a different taste as I go down the river is gummy worms, Cheez-Its, a little bit of beef jerky, and dried fruit. And that's pretty much it for every stop.
And what else are you consuming during the race?
So I go with the sports drink that is in my bladder. That gives me pretty much all the calorie and all the other nutrition that I need. I switched that out. I got about 6 liters with me and switch those out on every stop that I go to.
Okay. And Jeremy, what was your plan? What was your food bag?
Our food bag was a little different because of the temperatures that we were dealing with, the very cold temperatures. So we did put a little bit more in our food bag from a fat and protein perspective than we typically would. But like Ozzy, I drink most of my calories. I use either Cytomax or Tailwind as my primary hydration source. And obviously that also has electrolytes. And and some carbs in it. But then I also do a lot of liquid supplementation. So I drink Perpetuum for some fats and some longer term fuel sources. And I do the same with Ensure. I mix in some Ensure, like a little old man that needs to drink my meal replacement. So I use Ensure quite a bit. And then just because I enjoy having a little bit of something solid once in a while, I usually throw in a protein bar or a Cliff Bar or something that is more for boredom and interest to make me feel like I'm actually eating a meal. But that is my primary food bag right there. And I know that you had mentioned soups. We don't normally eat soups. We just did in that case because it was cold and it was a good way to stay warm.
All right. And Bryan, what's your food bag look like?
Mine's changed over time. And the reason I mention that is that my expectations of how I do in the race has changed over time, and that might be useful to some people. So now I'm much more like these folks, and this is a lot to do with Alma helping me as well. So in other words, a lot of calories coming from liquids, etc. But prior to that, when I was doing the 340 and I wasn't trying to hit the podium, I tried a lot of kind of sports type Cliff Bars, and I found that kind of stuff gets old really fast, and so tried to mix in some other foods as well. So I guess I'm not giving you a clear answer. I think a lot of it depends on what your goals are in the race. If you're trying to be on the podium, the kind of diet they describe is what we've evolved to. But if your expectations are to just finish it, that's a different, you can do things differently.
And I'll throw this out to you guys. If I'm a first year paddler coming in, what sort of things would I want to do? Do I want to try and use, a liquid product throughout? Do I want real food? What are your thoughts for that first year paddler?
I'm going to give you a non-answer. My non-answer is do whatever you've trained for. So figure it out way before. Don't come into the race and think that you can drop in some type of new nutrition plan the day before. It's whatever you've been doing for the past 6 months, because just like we train our muscles and we train our energy delivery systems and we train our cardiovascular system, we've got to train our gut and our nutrition system as well. So whatever you've trained on is what I would do.
I think a very key, important fundamental is true for anyone who's going to be doing this race, and that is understanding the physiology, a very simple physiology of what is happening when we are racing down the river. And you are racing, whether you want to finish in 70 hours or in sub 30s, if that's going to be possible in the next year or so. You never know. So anyway, your gut, the blood going to your gut gets shunted when you exercise. It's a normal response when you exercise, let alone actually just going for a walk.
What's shunted?
So the blood is shunted from the gut to the muscles to supply oxygen and much needed energy. And that is what the body needs. The muscles are saying, I'm exercising here. I need some water. I need some fuel. So the blood is shunted away from the gut about almost as much as 80%. So that is so important to understand that, because that means the hamburgers, the pizza, they're going to be waiting for you at the finish line. If you eat that throughout the race, you're going to have some gut distress. You're going to have some nausea, some vomiting, some bloating, some big problems. So what you're going to be hearing already is that you need to drink your calories. So pick a drink. Now the drink has already been, the science is already there. It's a lot of these sports drinks, and I'm just going to mention some. The very popular Gatorade, which started the whole sports nutrition, is still very valid. Yes, it's hit the mainstream, but to be honest with you, that's just their marketing technique. That means they're a rich company, but it's still a valid source. So Gatorade, and I'm going to recommend Gatorade Endurance. That is in powder, and you can find that in the Walmarts out there. So Gatorade Endurance, Hammerhead, Accelerate, Tailwind is very popular now. So those are from 6 to 8% carbohydrate, meaning they're 6 grams to 8 grams carbohydrate in 100 mils. So the science has already figured it out for you. So it's a matter of taste, what you want to try. So I would say start simple, something that you're accessible to, or you already started, or your friends says, I really like it, you should try it. Word of mouth doesn't hurt, and experience doesn't hurt either. So try that out. And the point was made very well by Jeremy. Start now. Don't start later. It starts now, because he is true to say that you are not only training your muscles, but you're also training your gut. And it takes really a short time for the gut to adapt, about 3 to 5 days on your short training days. And I'm going to say as little as two long training days to get your gut used to your diet.
And you brought up an interesting point. I think everyone here has some experience with it. Let's talk about some of that flavor, what do you call it? Flavor exhaustion or flavor. Bryan, you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so flavor fatigue, and I think I really want to talk to, before we get done talking about that, I want to talk about what Ozzy does strategically to avoid it. But I'll kind of tell you what it is. So it's a real simple concept. If you're getting so sore and worn out during the race that you're essentially getting the flu, that's what your body thinks. I'm getting sick. And it begins to take whatever you're eating and drinking and associate that with, that's making me sick. You need to stop that. And I had this happen to the point where it almost took me out of the second race I did, because I was using Gatorade, and Gatorade has its own issues. It's a little too much sugars, and that's one of the things we could get into later. But the point I'm trying to make is that after about 10 hours, just the taste of it, just like even putting the valve in my mouth, I would involuntarily retch, and I couldn't touch it. I couldn't have any more of it. And if I had to, at that time, I had to get water from as a replacement. And then that brings a whole series of issues of, like, you're not getting calories from you anymore, and you have salt issues if you're on plain water. So really what I'm saying is be really careful about this idea that you think you can eat the whole thing, something the whole time. You may have to switch gears. And Ozzy, from his ultra running, because it's even more intense in ultra running, he has strategies to try to avoid this. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so my food bags are just for that purpose. So when I'm coming from the ultra running community, that was a trick that I learned, that every aid station is to pick a different food, whatever it is, banana, PB&J, Crustable, and just eat some of that. But I was doing the liquid diet as well, but just to mess with your body, that it doesn't associate just drinking with pain. And that kept me going. And that's what my food bags are in the 340, is just to trick my brain to go, yeah, we can still drink this. It's going to be okay. And it's worked for me well so far. It's probably the last 5-6 years when it comes to running, but also in kayaking. I just do that now because that's what I used to do in the past. So tricking your body is essential in that sense.
One tip that I would recommend when it comes to flavor fatigue, yes, think about 340 miles, just never ending. So with that, your drink gets pretty mundane. Yeah. My recommendation for you is to pick at least 2 different flavors of your sports drink, and save your favorite flavor for the end, something for you to look forward to. And if you have 3 flavors, that's even better. You can do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. In simple terms, the first 100 miles is your least favorite. The next 100 miles after that is your second favorite. And you're going to finish with your favorite drink. And that's going to mentally help you change it up. You need every spark, any trick of the trade to keep you going, especially at the very end.
All right.
And at night, it takes discipline at night to eat and drink. At least for me, I've never had a 340 where when I went into the nighttime, I actually enjoy the nights. I'm not miserable. They're my favorite part of the race, but I just stopped eating and drinking. It just doesn't happen. And I have to remind myself. In fact, Alma's even gone so far as to have a timer to remind us when we have to eat and drink.
And no, it's a good point, having a timer, because yeah, you're not really hungry on the race. Or I don't know how many of you guys actually get hungry and go, hey, you know what I really could use right now?
Yeah,
so
if
how
you're
many
hungry, you're too
rest
late.
of you guys use timers? Ozzy?
Yeah, if you're hungry, you're too late. I do the same thing. I have a timer on. It goes off about every 15 minutes. It's my key to not only know where I'm at, but also take a sip or two of my nutrition stuff and keep going. So.
Okay.
So
We did-
this,
Sorry.
Get Jeremy in there, sorry.
Oh, no worries. We did the same thing. Drink every 15 minutes and eat something, or add something additional like a perpetuum or an Ensure at the top and the bottom of the hour. And my goal personally, is to put about 300 to 350 calories into my stomach every hour. It's about what I shoot for.
You bring up two things I want to touch on. First of all, Ensure.
Mhm.
I know it's been a lifesaver for me a number of times out there. How many of you guys have used Ensure in the past? Bryan, Alma, Jeremy?
I've played with it, but it just doesn't sit with me, so I just stopped.
And I should say that the way that I take my perpetuum is just like an Ensure. I actually use Ensure bottles, and a couple of scoops of perpetuum go into that bottle, fill it up just to the bottom of the neck, shake it up, and it's it's basically taken like a shake. I'm not taking perpetuum in a really diluted form. I'm taking it in a much more concentrated form, just like an Ensure.
So to understand, you would take basically what would be 1 hour's worth of perpetuum in a bottle real quick, as opposed to sucking on it multiple times through the hour.
I wouldn't say so. I'm not taking a full 300 and some calories of just perpetuum in one shot. I'm trying to get 300 and some calories in over the course of the whole hour. So it might be, if I'm taking perpetuum at the bottom of the hour, it might be 100 calories, 125 calories of perpetuum. But yeah, I'm mixing it thick like a shake in a small bottle, in a small Ensure bottle. So it's 2 or 3 swallows. And we even, in some races, we didn't do this in the MR340, but in some races where things are happening a lot faster, we even put corks in instead of putting a cap on, so that you can do it one-handed, pull it up, yank the cork off, drink it, throw it in the boat, keep paddling. So just 1 or 2 swallows is all you want.
so yeah, you're touching on an excellent question now. It's how much? And
That's what I was about to get into.
That's going
Thank
to
you,
be
Alma.
very individualized, but there's a general rule. There is a cap to how much even an elite athlete can take in. We're finding out it's about 60 grams. You can push the envelope even more. So there's some tricks there. Caffeine is one. The fructose in the sports drink is another one, but not everyone can take it. So, hey, there's the challenge. But anyway, okay, for our people out there that wants to know, okay, how much do I take? Okay. There's a couple of general rules that we'll give you. Is from 25 grams, we find out, for say the woman, the smaller person, usually it's the woman, to 60 grams in an hour. So if, just to keep it simple, let's just say that's Gatorade, that's about 16 to 32 ounces in an hour. When you're starting out, you're going to find that's a big gap. So it's very individualized. Okay. So here's the second trick. And I call it the silver lining of our race. So what's a silver lining? We are going to be very intimate with our urine. Oh my goodness. So yeah, so you don't want to pee in the boat. I guess you could, and some racers do, especially if you're really cutting on time. Okay, that's a topic we don't want to deal too much with. But anyway, you're going to collect your pee and you're going to pour it out ever so often, right? You take advantage of that, because you want the color of your urine to tell you that you're drinking about the right amount, and that you want to see a light yellow color to your urine. Okay. If it's crystal clear like water, hyponatremia, scary, don't go there. Okay. Hopefully your support crew will tell you, you're having those kind of conversations. Let me tell you, food safety and kosher courtesy things go out the door on this race. Okay. There's no washing your hand. You're going to talk about intimate stuff like that. Are you, so am I having diarrhea, that kind of stuff. So, but the color of your urine is very important. To very dark, almost amber, then you're not drinking enough. So again, you're training now, you're testing your beverage, and you're also seeing how much you're drinking. So the very first times you're out there, for the new people out race, getting to train. So get a feel for it. Don't stress out, go ahead and drink to thirst, and then just keep the tabs after your run, then see how much you drank. Pay attention to how much you filled your bladder and how much you drank. Keep notes and pay attention to your urine. You're going to get to a very good place.
And that's an excellent point. And Jeremy brought up something too. How many calories can we actually take in an hour as a racer? I mean, what are we aiming for? I think, Jeremy, you said 350 or so.
I shoot for 300 to 350, but that's based on a lot of personal experimentation and figuring that out. As Alma talked about earlier, blood is removed from our digestive tract. We can't process as much as we normally would. We're sweating a lot. Our blood plasma's down. So just physiologically, we can't process a meal every hour the way that we could if we were, just hanging out in our living rooms. So for me, 300 to 350 is ideal. I know people that can't process more than a couple hundred. I know some people that think they can process a lot more than that. I don't know how much is actually, making it into their bloodstream. But for me, 300 to 350, but that's certainly not what's going to be right for everybody.
And Ozzy, anything
Yeah,
to add?
I have the same thing. I used in the last year's 340, I used about just over 300 calories an hour as I'm going on the river. So that's my plan, is to replace that every hour. So, taking the calories throughout the hour, about 300 calories an hour, all day, all night.
Oops, sorry.
No, you're okay.
Anyway, so for going back to that 25 grams to 60 grams an hour. So one thing a little nutrition, 1 gram of carbohydrate is 4 calories. So it's going to be between 100 to 300 to 20 calories. So 100 to 300 calories, just what you're hearing. But again, that's a huge difference. That's a big difference. So again, you're going to have to feel for it. So yeah, that's a great point.
One thing that Alma pointed out to me when I started getting serious about my time, she went through some of the physiology with me and your calorie intake and everything that we're touching on. But I really want to emphasize something that for me was it caused a shift in my mentality. And I'm kind of coming back to this idea that you have to be disciplined. She pointed out that you are actually expending more calories and energy than you can possibly take in. It's not possible to you're losing the fight the entire race in terms of your caloric intake. And so for me, by realizing that I'm already losing a battle, then to not eat for 3 hours at night just because I wasn't in the mood is not acceptable. I have to keep the calories coming in, because by the time I get into day 2, I'm already starting to switch to fat burning. And, for me, I have a lot of that. So that's a great plan for me. But my point I'm trying to make is you're behind the curve the whole time. So you have to eat, and you have to eat the whole time, not just when you feel like it.
Yeah.
The best case scenarios when it comes to these endurance rates is that 70%, if you can meet 70%, by gosh, you're going to do fantastic. But it can be anywhere from 50 to 70% for many of us. I would be, yeah. So it's, that's just what the research shows. And it's easier for people who bike and, say, people like ourselves who kayak, because the mechanics is in our favor. We're not running and jogging our stomachs. I'm sure that's something that Ozzy can attest to. That's this particular challenge that runners have to face with. That mechanical jarring adds some physical trauma to trying to keep food down. And but we are at an advantage with kayaking. Yet even with that, 70% is what the research says is the best case scenario into meeting your calorie needs.
Yeah, don't run after eating a burrito. It's not recommended.
All right.
You're barfing out.
No, but I found out too that and through my training, the better shape that I'm in, cardiovascular shape, the less calories I use per hour down the river, which means that gap, that downhill slide that Bryan's talking about, becomes shorter and smaller. So if I have a good cardiovascular system trained up for the race, I'm much better off nutrition-wise throughout the race.
Bryan had mentioned how important it was to eat during those 3 hours at night when you don't want to. I think that when you're doing something that's this long, when you're doing something that is stretching into the 24, 32, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours, a lot of it's really about making sure that things don't go wrong. You have a plan. Everything's not going to go perfectly, but you've got to make sure that you don't have any crux moments that really go wrong. And for me, the nutrition is a big part of that. If I fall off the nutrition, I'm in serious trouble. And especially and I know we'll talk about this a little later, but on the hydration side, if you fall off the hydration cliff or you fall off the nutrition cliff, that is probably going to be the end of your race. And so Chris can share our nutrition plan with you guys. I gave it to him also before this webinar. But we have a checklist. So like when I take a new food drop, I'm giving my empty food drop, everything I've eaten, all the wrappers, all the empty containers, they're all in a bag that I hand back to my ground crew. And they're checking in everything I've eaten to make sure that I'm staying on my calorie target. And just like Ozzy and Alma and Bryan said, I've got some variety in my bag. When they hand me a bag, it's more calories than I need, or I think I'm going to need between this drop and the next drop. So there is some variety in there. So I won't have eaten everything, I hope. If I've eaten everything, something's gone wrong. But I hope I haven't eaten everything. But they're still checking what I have eaten to make sure that I'm on target. Because if I'm not, I need to know. Either if it's really critical, they'll call me or tell me by radio. But at the very least, let me know at the next drop. So it really is crucial to stay on plan in terms of the calories in. Even if you're shifting what you're eating, that's okay. But you've got to make sure that you keep the calories coming in.
Such a valid point.
Go
Absolutely. Can I mention, we mentioned Ensure, and there's two distinctions that we need to make to the public right now. What the Gatorade, the Tailwind, Cytomax, your sports drink that's going to carry you for most of the race, that's rich in carbohydrates. And Tailwind is 100% carbohydrates. So some people love it. It works for them. Anyway, no, excuse me. All those drinks are 100% carbohydrate, and they have electrolytes as well. What we talk about when we mention Ensure, and there's other drinks like sports drinks like Spiz and Perpetuum. Okay, that is what we call a fluid meal replacement. In this case, that was created specifically for these kind of races that are multi-day. By golly, you're going to need more calories from, let's add some fat here, let's add some protein, because we're breaking down protein at the very end of this thing. So these companies have basically made these meal replacements. And some very wise racers said, you know what, what's Ensure? That's already in the market. Let's use it. So that's what you call savvy racer. So Ensure, you're hearing people do on this panel is that their sports drinks, their carbohydrate sports drinks, it carries them for the majority of the race. But to make up the difference, they'll gulp in some Ensure or some Spiz. Although some racers can actually train to do most of their beverages from these meal replacements, from what I hear. The body's very adaptable, the stomach's very adaptable. You just got to train for it. But I would say start out with the liquid carbohydrate sport drinks.
Yeah. I want to add something here that I've never done a 340 where at some point in time the nutrition became was more problematic. I got severe nausea, or something. It doesn't matter about the examples, but you also probably ought to have your support crew have some options. And by options, I don't mean a bag of Pringles. I mean, there needs to be some things that you could switch gears to. And also, what would you eat if you were recovering from the flu? So it'd be liquids and maybe a broth and some crackers. Well, the broth is problematic, but I've gotten through severe bouts of nausea by hit a checkpoint and I thought I was going to be in trouble. And I just limped along with some crackers and just kind of trying not overloading my stomach and trying to get hydration going again. Exactly what Jeremy talked about. I probably started having trouble with my hydration and I came back. And so by the time I got to the next checkpoint, I was back in the game again. So there is this, I think you have to kind of, some of that stuff you just gonna have to do it in your pre-training to determine what can you eat. If you eat a can of Campbell's soup, does it give you massive indigestion and are you an unhappy camper? You're gonna have to try it out ahead of time.
All right. And you bring up a couple of good points, or we've been kind of touching on them. One of the most common reasons that people drop out on day one, especially first-year paddlers on day one, is nausea, stomach issues. So how do you think we can avoid these? Let's start with Jeremy on this one.
I'll sound a little like in fact, all of us might sound like a little bit of a broken record here, but I think, at least in my experience, the majority of my nausea issues come back to hydration. If I've gone off my hydration and I'm getting dehydrated, I have more trouble processing food and processing those calories that are in my gut. And I end up not feeling well, and my stomach goes south. My stomach turns on me. But if I can stay hydrated, I typically don't have nausea issues. And the really insidious part of that is that it's, if you miss a meal or two, it's fairly easy to recoup those calories and start taking calories back in. If you bonk, you can take a goo packet or something, and you'll recover fairly quickly. But if you've really gone off your hydration, and your stomach's turned, and you're dehydrated, that's something that can take a day or two to really bring back into balance. And that's the end of your race. It's all over. So, so for me, when you say stomach's turning south and feeling nausea, it typically is, in my own personal experience, a hydration issue. Whether that is what's happening to racers literally on the first day, like before they've hit the first checkpoint, I don't know. I'm not a great person to answer that, but hydration and nausea are really closely tied for me.
All right. Ozzy or the Hopkins?
Yep, I've got the same thing. I have not experienced much nausea in the past because I try to train as I race, and I've experienced those in the past. So then I kind of like, oh, here's what I got to do different. But it's back to hydration, just like Jeremy says. It's if you stop drinking, if you stop taking calories, you'll get there eventually.
Okay, and Bryan?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
So I have created and Chris, you've already listed it, I think, for the listeners, but I created a handout. Actually, the week before the race, there's some best practices, and the morning of, when the jitters hit you, how to get the stomach ready for the actual event. It's a very exciting time. You worked really hard for it, and believe me, everybody's nervous. So, but nervousness means your stomach doesn't want anything, but you gotta eat, and there's a way to do it. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that can cause nausea. I basically load up in my carbohydrates like a runner would the night before. I have just a good old spaghetti and meat sauce meal, and keep it simple, no vegetables, low in fiber. And I'm hydrating the whole week, probably taking more calories than I plan to on a normal week, because what I'm wanting to do, I'm saturating my body with fluids wherever I can get it. If it means drinking my sports drink, that first phase sports drink, do it. Water with lemon, caffeine tea to a point. But anyway, and then carbohydrates too, simple to rice, pasta, mashed potatoes, easy on the gravy, you know, cereals, bananas. You are trying to carbohydrate load. And also be liberal with your sodium that whole week before too, unless you are on doctor's advice to watch your sodium, but you're going to sweat out a lot of sodium here. So that is all listed in the handout I provide. That morning of is also very important. So you can eat up to 4 hours before the event. You might be up anyway, but no later than an hour before the race. Have something. For some of us, this is where Ensure comes in perfectly. Okay, drink your fluid. You know, for me, it's just what works for me is oatmeal. It works for me, you know, and I put my whey protein to it. And then, so up from the time that I wake up to the time of the race, I am hydrating. I'm trying to get 16 ounces of fluid down. So I'm trying to super hydrate. And yeah, it's going to take an extra trip to the bathroom, but hey, you in the bathroom, you're going to be intimate for the whole time. So you might as well start that relationship. So yeah, and and then 15 minutes before the race, I'm also still drinking, and that you're going to keep your body by the time the bell rings. So and you're off. So the thing about the jitters, how to deal with the jitters. So light, as I mentioned, just low fiber foods, easy to digest carbohydrate foods. Yeah, a protein that you can handle. That sounds good to you. But caffeine in the morning, it may add the extra jitters, but you're someone who needs the caffeine. See, again, it's very individualized. So if you tend to have loose stools, I would stay away from caffeine and consider Imodium. Okay, if the nerves really hit you, and some of us do have problems with loose stools that morning of. So think about Imodium just to, after you've gone to the bathroom, you've given yourself the time to empty, and then so that will help you out. So caffeine is going to be essential later in the race, and we can talk about that later, but hopefully I covered those things to help you. It's a simple diet, as I've said, just carbohydrates, fluids, not much. Don't go too crazy, but don't forget your breakfast either.
Yeah, don't eat a high fiber meal in the middle of the race. That's probably not going to be helpful.
So since, as Alma said, we're going to have to be comfortable with bodily functions like this. I'll just quickly say that, you know, she was talking about what she eats beforehand and what she eats in the morning. I actually tailor all of that and try to go off solid foods. You know, I'll have an early dinner the night before an event, and then go off of solid foods and begin some liquid diet and meal replacements, because I want my gut to be empty. You know, I would prefer during that race to not need to visit a restroom for a bowel movement. And I'll share that I was successful. Didn't need one during our race. And, you know, that's a big thing. You know, our goal was to never get out of the boat. And we certainly had accommodations to take care of that in the boat while we were on the river. But it's a whole lot easier if you don't have to. And so we start making those accommodations early. Caffeine does, oops, as I'm dropping a pen, sorry. Caffeine does, you know, help me along in my morning rituals. So I don't take caffeine the morning of the race. And in fact, we actually wean off caffeine. Steve and I both wean off caffeine for the month before the race to maximize the effect of caffeine if we need it during the race. So just a couple of small points there that I thought of as Alma was talking.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Try to get the liquid diet at least the day before to have the empty stomach. So, you know, my gut is used to it. But leading up, like Alma said, leading up that week, I eat everything that is good for you and try to load up as much as I can so the body is ready.
And I should jump back in here and say that What I'm talking about is somebody who is trying to beat their best time. They're pushing for the podium. They want to be at the front of the pack. I kind of view it as there's the podium racer, and there's more of an expedition oriented approach to it, where you are going to stop. You're going to get some sleep cycles on land. You're going to stop and use the bathroom on land. All of that is perfectly okay. And the examples that I'm giving are not in that more expedition oriented venue. I'm talking about like every second counts, and you literally are never going to get out of the boat, and you're going to keep moving, constant forward progress, do everything in the current that you can do in the current, because that's a free moving walkway. If you're listening to us talk and you're like, I don't know if I want to do this now, my God, they're trying to figure out how not to go to the bathroom for 60 hours. This is insane. You definitely don't have to follow this advice, because this is something, the details we're talking about are the really nitpicky, every second counts details. So I just want to make sure that we're not turning people off of the MR340 by saying we take Imodium and then we never go to the bathroom.
And to be totally fair, my day before the event, Monday at 11 o'clock, I am standing outside what used to be Oklahoma Joe's, wherever they call it now. And I get my big old 2 choices of meat and, Texas toast and baked beans and the whole 9 yards. And that's the big meal beforehand. And why? Because it's tasty. I don't care. It's the one time I get really good barbecue. I'm from Wisconsin. We don't barbecue things. We kill them, but we can't cook them well. So
cover them in cheese.
Yeah. You want something good, put it in a casing, call it a brat. There you go. So yeah, there's a wide spectrum of things you can do. And speaking of uncomfortable topics, one of the other things that comes up on a regular basis in terms of nutrition is, of course, the other end. Stories of diarrhea or GI upset during the race. Any ideas about that? How we can solve it, how you can deal with it? We can start with Hopkins.
Yeah, I mean, Imodium is your friend. You should definitely bring Imodium with you on the race. But I'm always a little nervous about it, just like I'm a little nervous about taking ibuprofen and some other drugs that can be problematic, and especially, things like Imodium, it's altering your body's normal process. So the last thing I think somebody would want to do is they feel like they might have loose stools, or they're kind of having a little bit of an issue, and they just start hammering Imodium the whole race. For all I know, and I'm not a medical professional, that could be for over the course of 50 hours, that might be a really bad idea. So some of these things have their place as you try to recover from a bout of in this case, we're talking about diarrhea, and Imodium is definitely helpful. But I would say that if you aren't getting it under control between that checkpoint and the next, then you probably got a more complicated issue on your hands. And I don't have a beautiful answer for that.
Certainly you want to stop the caffeine if you're drinking it and you got diarrhea, because caffeine is a stimulant. It's stimulating your vagus nerve, which, tells your gut what to do and gets it excited. So you don't want that because it's already excited. So stop the caffeine if you're having loose stools. If you are looking forward to fruit, or you have fruit in your bag, that might not be a good idea while you're having these loose stools. Yeah, just slow down, but whatever you do, don't stop drinking your fluids. Drink your fluids, especially your sports drink, and hopefully you have something salty that you can also down your losing electrolytes. So, crackers, if you can nibble on those. And it does mean slow down and try to pull through and see if it's going to give it a little bit of time. So.
I will give one piece of advice I think it's not about nutrition, and it's not about any kind of physiology issue, but if everything's going wrong, you can't stop dry heaving. I had a partner who this happened to. He just couldn't stop dry heaving, but he eventually got back in the boat, and we were the second boat into St. Charles that year. And we took 15 minutes of just sitting on shore, get the paddle out of your hand, just relax, maybe lay back a little bit, disconnect your brain from this intensity of this moment you're in, and just try to center yourself again. And it worked. And I've had done it for myself too, where you kind of, okay, I'm ready to go. Don't have your support team load your boat and say, I'm done. Just sit down and relax, try, and maybe even stop talking to a lot of people, and just try to get, there's an emotional element to some of this. And that's really what I'm trying to say is, you know, don't get so worried about your nutrition that you make your nutrition even worse.
And Ozzy, I'm familiar with enough stories from ultra running. What are your recommendations? Since I've heard about trees and bushes being horribly abused during ultra runs.
There's some of that. I have luckily avoided all that. I'm very particular on my training. I try not to take any new foods the day before, the week before, the day off, so that I don't run into any of those issues. I'm very plain in my diet the week before and during, so I try to avoid that. So luckily so far, I've seen some examples and heard some examples in the bushes, but I've luckily avoided that.
All right. And one other nutrition issue comes up all the time, acid reflux and heartburn. I know for me, night 2, it's horrible. So what do you guys do for it? Let's start with Jeremy.
I am extremely fortunate in that I don't have too many issues with it. But as Ozzy just said, I think part of that is that I spend so much of my training, you know, this weekend, I had a training session this morning that was 3 hours. I have one tomorrow that's 5 hours, and I'm training my food. You know, a huge part of the reason I do those longer sessions is to train my nutrition. So I've found what works for me. And actually in the past couple of years, the only indigestion-y, acid refluxy thing I had was in the MR340 when I did something that I'd never done before. Someone handed me a Red Bull and I said, all right, whatever. They said, this is great. And I said, fine. And I drank half of it and went, that was disgusting. And I threw it away. And about 20 minutes later, man, I had the most rotten stomach, and it was acidy and it burned. And I just went back to my normal food and everything turned out okay. But for all of my always train and never try something different, I did. You know, this guy at a ramp said, here, have a Red Bull. And I was like, okay, fine. And off we went. And it was a horrible idea. So I would say the best thing you can do is practice ahead of time and don't deviate and try something new.
Yeah, same thing as Jeremy has. I try nothing new. I just do the same thing over and over. Train your body to, on these long runs, just train with the nutrition that works for you. If you try something new, and if your body takes it, bring it on. But yeah, I have not had those issues either.
That's true with the caffeine too. Caffeine is actually a good performance enhancer, and we're finding that it can really help you stay alert. It's the alertness, pain toleration, refocus. Hey, change, maybe this isn't so bad. I was suffering, but you know what? It's beautiful outside. So it changed your mental capacity. So definitely valid, and it doesn't diurese like what was a concern before. So yeah, a lot of athletes use caffeine, but here's the caveat. So it has to be in the shape or form that you're used to. So you know, if you get given something like a Red Bull, for instance, and you're not used to it. So if you're a coffee drinker, then stick with coffee. If you're a tea drinker, that's me. That's my way of getting my caffeine. So you can't overdo it though. And I'd be interested to hear what Jeremy and Ozzy have to say about that. But it really plays a role when you're really, especially the first night, and you're finding it's a night, it's a nightcap. It's definitely, and it does have a 5-hour half-life. So, you know, once you take your caffeine, you're maybe nursing it a little bit, but you don't have to feel like it's to your tolerance levels. So there's a lot of individualization to that too. What about you guys? What's your experience? What's your caffeine?
Well, I like caffeine a lot. I taper off at least a week ahead, and have nothing day one or night one. Night two, I need it. It's when last race, I could not see the river at all in front of me, because of hallucinations. But when I had caffeine, it went away for a little bit. I got energized, and I had certain intervals where I took caffeine just to get me through the hallucinations and not being able to see the river, and got me to sunrise, and then everything just came back. So that's how I use caffeine to my advantage at that point.
Mhm. For me, I wean off a little bit before that. I try to go into the race basically being non-dependent on caffeine, because I'm very dependent on caffeine in my daily life. I drink a couple of cups of coffee a day. I do use some of my meal replacers with caffeine in them. There's a perpetuum that's called Cafe Latte, and it's a cafe latte flavor, and it's got a bit of caffeine in it. And so as I go into the evening, I switch my perpetuum to that style of perpetuum. But beyond that, I try not to take, that's a very low amount of caffeine in that. I should say that's a low amount of caffeine in that particular supplement. As I get tired in the night, I actually use chewing gum. Chewing gum is wicked good for me, to stop myself from falling asleep. If I'm getting tired, a couple of sticks of chewing gum go in, and it's amazing how that can really keep me going. But if I get to the point where I feel like I need caffeine, like I need specifically to resolve an issue with attention and energy levels, I need caffeine. I actually use small caffeine tablets so that I can very carefully observe how much I'm taking, and I can make sure that I don't go over what I should go, what I should take. So that's another thing. I train it ahead of time. I practice it. I do night training. And during that night training, I'll practice with the caffeine tablets when I need them. But that's a way that I can make sure that I'm controlling exactly what I'm getting, and I know exactly what's gone in so that I don't accidentally take too much.
Speaking of which, how many of you have actually taken too much caffeine on the race and run into problems? I'm the only one. Good. So
I haven't.
Yeah.
So I'm a caffeine addict, and I've been for a long time. The concept of tapering a month beforehand just frightens me, kind of like a heroin addict being cut off. So, but during the race, I'm frustrated because most of the gels out there, and we do gels, and we do them for not just the calories, but they also are a really good way to kind of dose your salts, because you kind of know what you're getting in there. And but there's this trend where all of the gels have caffeine in them. I found, especially the last time we did the 340, when I was getting essentially a quarter cup or half a cup of coffee every time I hit one of those gels, I think it was detrimental. I think by the end of the day, I could feel that it was too much caffeine, and I just kind of wish there was some other way to begin. And I know this year I'm going to work really hard to find non-caffeinated gel-like equivalents, probably perpetuum, because I didn't have the problems that you talked about, Chris, where you're hallucinating, but I could just feel that it was counterproductive to what I was doing.
And for those of you that missed the conversation earlier, my first year in the 340, I was taking no-dose tablets, plus had 5-hour energy and some other things. And I pushed off of Herman at 10 o'clock at night thinking, oh, this will be fine. Popping a few no-dose, go on my way. Turns out caffeine can actually make hallucinations worse. And I hit 4 wing dikes in Burger Bend. I'm not even sure how I do that now that I look back at a map, but I was convinced they went all the way across the river. And it was a horrible experience. And I'm a pretty lightweight person when it comes to caffeine. 1 5-hour energy is fantastic for me at the end of the race, as long as I finish in 4.5 hours. If I'm 6 hours out, I'm toast. It's not good. Talk to Scott Reeves. He saw me through that experience once, and I was convinced that his pedal boat had toddlers running around it because I couldn't figure out what his legs were doing. It's a tricky situation. So I'm going to ask, does anyone use anything as a supplement that isn't caffeine to keep them up at night that they want to talk about? Herbal energy pills or any of that?
Chewing gum and singing.
Caffeine.
Those are my two.
Yep, I'm with Jeremy on that one.
Music.
Chewing gum helps a lot in singing.
Yeah, music. For me, it's music. I actually sacrificed a little bit of weight in the boat, and the good news is now the technology is pretty remarkable. So we got Bluetooth speakers that'll run for 12 hours, that are waterproof, that are actually very light. And so we would use music as a reward cycle. So when we were really feeling down, it was like, okay, get the tunes going. And it was a miracle worker for us in terms of trying to pep up. So I mean, that probably might not work for everybody else, but for both of us, it's an important factor in the race for us.
And Bryan, were those your own tunes, or did Alma force you to listen to something else?
No. We actually, our favorite music during the race, not that anybody cares, was kind of modern Brazilian pop. So it's always upbeat music, and we really like that. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
I just want to make a point before we move on to from caffeine. So there seems to be, dietitians, we're into numbers. So 90 to 180 milligrams of caffeine in an hour seems to be majority of people can tolerate. Optimal would be 200 milligrams. So do read the labels. It has hopefully caught that it's important to start learning a little bit about reading labels, if not already. So yeah, to see how much those energy drinks provide, there's very strong. I think, didn't I read 6 cups of coffee equivalents of? It's been a while, I haven't read those, but anyway, so it's probably going to be more than that. So yeah, it's pretty strong stuff. But if you're one of the few that can take it, but we all have a threshold, and jitteriness, like Chris mentioned, that'll happen to you. So again, from 90 to 180 milligrams seems to be optimal.
And Chris, you had said what other supplements, do we use specifically for the night and getting through, those doldrums. But in my mind, supplements, I shy away from supplements because they all do something to our bodies. There is some chemical and biophysical result of taking a supplement. And unless I know exactly what that is, and unless I have a need for it, unless there is some shortcoming or deficit that I'm trying to make up for, I tend to not look to the supplement as being some magic pill that's going to increase my performance. If I have a specific deficit, if I am short on sodium, or I could use that caffeine because I'm really crashing and I've practiced with it and I know what it's going to do, then I might, be tempted to, and I might, decide to use a supplement in some form. But otherwise, I'm pretty leery of messing with the physiology that's just naturally occurring, because there are always consequences. There's no free ride. There's no magic pill. So I get really nervous about people starting to pile on the supplements. I see people with these baggies of pills. They look like drug dealers. I'm going to go race. I'm going to do my workout. And you're like, oh, this is terrifying. I have no idea what's in that bag. So I tend to shy away from them.
So what about the Hammer anti-fatigue or the ubiquitous electrolyte pills, etc.? Do any of you guys use those, or do you just go with sort of what's in the bottle in terms of, your liquid diet?
In my case, the liquid diet and what I have in my nutrition bag is planned out. I know how much I sweat. I know how hard I work. I know how many calories I burn. And so what's in that bag should cover me. I do carry some electrolyte tablets just in case things really go south and I've made a big mistake and I'm becoming hyponatremic and I need electrolytes. I carry some as an emergency stash, but otherwise, no.
But you're not popping an electrolyte pill or two every hour.
Nope.
I want to talk about that idea, exactly what Jeremy said, which is really important. And I almost would say, I want to plant a flag in the sand on this. Everybody who does this race needs to have electrolyte pills in the boat.
Yeah.
And a little bit of an understanding about the idea of what it means when you don't keep your salts up. And we even had a situation where Alma, just because of a shift in her interest and what she was eating and drinking more than probably she should have, and she was looking at her urine and realized that, one, she wasn't feeling so good, starting to get a headache, but she saw that her urine was crystal clear. And that's when we dug out the electrolyte pills and gave them to her. And within 45 minutes, she circled back on where she was going. If we didn't have those in the boat, it might have been problematic. So there's, the salt thing is important. It's almost not a separate subject, but you could talk about that for an hour in terms of how important it is.
Yeah. So a caution about what we're talking about. So hammer, Endurolytes? What are they called? Endurolyte.
Yeah, Endurolyte, yeah.
One. Some people hate those. They find them very difficult to digest. So try them out again during a long run. You want to seek the heat. Missouri heat, it's coming, we hope. So definitely take advantage of the humidity. Don't shy away from it. In fact, that's going to be your training ground. So that's when you can test drive these kind of things. So there's also the nuns, NWNs, and those come in different flavors. You can actually pop that into your drink, 1 tablet in 16 ounces. That will help. I will tell you though, a lot of people feel a lot more comfortable with just drinking their sodium from food, and that's pickle juice. It becomes super popular. I would advise that you actually drain the pickle juice from the pickle jar, the real pickle jar, versus the commercially made. The commercially made is made, it's nasty. It's got dyes in it and preservatives. It tastes terrible. So you're wasting your money. But if you get the real deal, 3 ounces of those is about 900 milligrams. It's a big shot of sodium. So you don't need any more than that. And chase it with water for sure. And it's not one of those that you're going to be popping all the time. Probably one would do it, see how you feel, and go from there. So, yeah.
So Alma, are you supplementing electrolytes consistently through the race, or are you relying mostly on your food intake and you're supplementing when the need arises? Correct.
Okay. Correct. However, great question. I feel that the way things went last year, you're so exhausted. I don't know about you guys, but eating at the last, 70 miles, it's like barf. I don't want anything, nothing, and you have to push the beverages. So hopefully the idea of saving your best flavored sports drink at the very end, but I'm now wondering, so we're going to test it out. Certainly when you're so exhausted, it's the sodium that I think you're so depleted. I bet you if you take a shot of, test your blood, you're going to be hyponatremic anyway, and to a safer level. But I would test out some sodium at the very end, some pickle juice at the end to help improve my appetite.
And a lot, some of that's going to depend on what kind of 340 we see too, because I don't want to sound like the grouchy old man here, but
he's a grouchy old man.
Yeah, but it seems like we've had the date of the 340 shift into cooler temperate zones for quite a while now. We have not had a July 98-degree intense wall of heat 340 in a while. And obviously in a situation like that, then your sweating and your fluids and your salts become really, really important. You cannot trivialize it.
And I want to kind of circle back on something here and go back to a little bit of nutrition, a little bit of supplementation. I've got a question that I want to deal with first from an audience member. Katie says, I have daily meds that I have to take regardless of what they're needed for. Does anyone else have this? How do you deal with it? I think in a practical sense, how do you take it at the right time? Does the added exertion and energy day over day have an effect on their effectiveness? I'm going to say, first of all, That's a tricky question. Bring your doctor into it. But leaving that aside, what do you do if you have a medication to deal with? And I'll start with Alma, since you seem the most qualified here to deal with that.
Well, I don't know about that, but I have to admit, dang it, this healthy lifestyle that I do and eating right and exercising on time, and I couldn't beat hypertension. So I've started just this past 2 months with hypertensive medicine. So what I'm going to do is just take it in the morning, like I usually do. We do carry pills, you know.
Yeah, mechanically, we use a small dry box. And then please, if these are really important meds, you need to bring another small dry box, because sometimes things happen. I've had one time that I got water into what were the pills and things. So they're mostly salt tabs, etc. But yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer from a medical standpoint, but mechanicalistically, they make these little small water type boxes, and that's probably the way you're going to want to go with that.
So yeah, it is a medical question. Do follow up, but I do intend to take my blood pressure medicine during the race. The good thing when it comes to blood pressure, exercise is a natural relaxant of the blood vessels. So you got to let the blood vessels expand when you're exercising. So it's a natural lowering of your blood pressure. But throughout the race, as you continue on, I would wager that maybe the blood pressure goes up. So I say definitely stay on your medicine, but it is a medical question. Good question.
Anyone else, Ozzy or Jeremy?
Talk to your doctor.
No, yeah, talk to your doctor.
On the same vein, what about people with special needs in terms of people who might be diabetic, gluten-free, etc.? Any recommendations for them when it comes to nutrition on the race? Because of course, this is going to be a very stressful event. I'm thinking more diabetic than gluten-free, saying that's very stressful, but how do you handle that?
I've got one. I've got a piece of advice. Tom Brady has a coach. Tiger Woods has a coach. I've got a coach. You know, I'm not putting myself in their category, by the way, but people that are really at the top of their game hire professionals to help them work through their performance issues and their performance opportunities. I would say, especially if you're dealing with something like that, but even if you're not, there are a lot of really great ultra endurance coaches and nutritionists out there who specialize in helping people like all of us make plans and put together the best thing for their own situation. They can tell you how to train and how to prepare and how to test things. I would say if you have the added challenge of something like, diabetes or some other dietary requirement, you're vegan or what have you, it's worth really in the end a small amount of money to hire a professional coach or, advisor to help you out.
Ozzy, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would second that. Become knowledgeable, get a coach, get good sources, and then train with it. Train with it.
I'm married a coach, so
I was about to make a mention of having a registered dietitian with us.
Yeah, with gluten, I think the person's going to be savvy. If we have any folks that are sensitive to gluten, they're going to be savvy enough to. Most of these sports drinks, it's going to be gluten-free, but the problem comes is are they manufactured with and where there's a potential for cross-contamination. So I would inquire with each company and to make sure. That's my advice. So
the beauty is you bring your own food and you have your own food handed to you. So it's not like you're traveling where you're having a hard time finding food that meets your diet. Obviously I guess that would mean it's not the time to go up and get a hamburger from the Boy Scouts who are grilling if you think you have to, avoid things. So I'm not saying the issue isn't real, but you're already kind of self-contained. You have brought what you need for that issue, and just make sure you know how to keep it dry and make sure you know how to handle it and do it in a boat, so you got to practice that stuff. And I'm thinking in terms of diabetic and potential needing for shots, you need to practice it in the boat and see if you can make sure you got a clean system going on.
in terms of specialized diets, my wife is actually vegan, and so are my sons. Perpetuum has Hammer has a vegan version of Perpetuum. I know they make it in strawberry flavor. I'm not sure what other flavors it might be in, but regardless, I think if what you're dealing with is a dietary thing, being diabetic to the point where you're taking shots is a little bit different. But if what you're dealing with is a special dietary need, if you're working at the level of detail that we've been talking about throughout this webinar, it's more an issue of finding the options that are out there and then training with them. But we're being extremely specific with what we put in our body, what types of things we use. There aren't any surprises for us. And I think you would just apply that same logic within the confines of your dietary restriction.
Okay. And I want to bring up another issue. Jeremy, you kind of touched on it before. You said maybe it was before, maybe it was last night when we met. But you talked about training low. And I want to get into that idea of nutrition for training. So do you want to talk about that and what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this vogue thing where people talk about putting themselves into ketosis and teaching their bodies to burn fat. And I don't subscribe to a full fat, low carbohydrate, put your body into ketosis diet in general. What I was mentioning last night was actually in response to that, and saying that I don't follow that. Sometimes I do train low, which means I want to feel what my body is like when I have low muscle glycogen. So oftentimes I'll do a double. I'll do a workout in the morning, and then I'll fast on carbohydrates through the day and do a second workout in the evening, or I'll do a workout first thing in the morning without having a breakfast, so that I have low muscle glycogen and I can experience that. I can give my body the chance to burn a higher percentage of fats. We are never burning purely fats or purely carbs. It's always a mix of the two. But so training low is something that you can integrate into your training methodology, hopefully with the guidance of a coach or somebody who really understands what they're doing. And so you do it as a specific and very intentional part of your training methodology. I wouldn't say that it's a key component of what I do. And I would definitely say that I'm relying on carbohydrates to get me from Caw Point to St. Charles. I am not relying on fats. I'm not eating, big wads of peanut butter. I'm not operating in ketosis. The fast, clean, efficient energy is carbohydrates, not fats. And so that is where I'm trying to operate. And I believe there's a lot of science behind that. And Alma can speak more clearly to that, but that's so yes, to answer your question, training low. I do train low. I do train when I have low muscle glycogen. I do it a couple of times a week, generally on a long exercise, and I'll start taking carbohydrates an hour or two into that training low, so that my body has the chance to replenish them while I'm in the process of being physical. And so I don't generally have like a whole 5-hour workout that's training low. I'll train low for the first few hours and then begin my nutrition plan. So.
And now, Ozzy, you had different ideas about it, and I just want to give you a bit of a forum to put your ideas out there.
No, I think, I don't know if I got lost in translation yesterday. I train low on carbohydrate, just like Jeremy says, and that maybe that I misunderstood what we were talking about yesterday, but that kind of gets you into that, more into that burning fat. How does your body react to burning fat? How do you slow down? Because you do. And how does that feel? How can I get out of it? How's my mood? So I do practice that just for that reason. So when I do it paddling. So I will go down the river, obviously with people, and I will not have carbs or anything as much as I can ahead of time. And I go down the river as much as I can, and then I'm like, oh, this is how it feels. How do I get out of it? And try to get out of it in the boat while I paddle. Mm-hmm.
So that's an excellent idea, sort of putting yourself into that position that you're going to see yourself in the race. Please don't try this with electrolytes necessarily, but put yourself in the position and then try to get yourself out of it.
Yes.
So you know what you're doing when your brain.
Yeah. train to see how it works so that you don't, it's another, I like to control my environment, right? So I like not to be surprised. So this is one way I wouldn't be surprised. I'm, oh, this is how it feels now. This is where I'm heading. Did I forget to drink? Did I forget to eat? Maybe I should take some of these things to get out of it. Right?
And Alma, I'm sure you have something to add to this.
Yeah, the concept of training low carbohydrate, to me, that's 40% carbohydrate, roughly 30% protein, 30% fat. And that's something I've been doing for years because I started out in bodybuilding. And from there, I mean, that was all about physique, and it's a calorie deficit. And I have had a wonderful revelation, something that we talk about that sealed the deal, that now that I've been training high carbohydrate, so 65% carbohydrate, I feel fantastic. My metabolism is higher. I'm actually like losing a little bit of weight or keeping my weight even at a level that I was fighting for before, because I just revved up my metabolism. So my body is primed to really love the carbohydrates, and I've increased all the thermogenesis of burning energy. So I just have, after years of being low, I now love going back to being high.
Now, is that because you went,
and keeping a
and then
good
went
weight?
high?
So,
Is it because you went low and then you went high, or is it just because you're higher carb?
Because I'm a higher carb. My metabolism's higher. I'm more energized in my workouts. It's the way to go when it comes to these long endurance type of events. So, and I think what, to me, what's happening is with Jeremy and Ozzy is like, you can tell the best athletes are the ones that are well read, and they're always researching, they're always looking, and you have to respect that. So I give them kudos, and I see it all the time. So, and I think what's happening too, they're not really mentioning it, but they're trimming their bodies, they're keeping their bodies lean by changing their carbohydrates up and down, keeping it guessing. So that is actually a trick of bodybuilders as well. The bodybuilders are the prime when it comes to changing their metabolism to try to stay as lean as they can. So it's a practice that's, I think, came from the bodybuilding world. It's not entirely new. I've been doing it for so many years. I'm so happy I'm eating my carbs. I'm a happy girl.
Just to make sure that
Yay, carbs.
Yeah, I went to really dark stouts and kind of moved away from porters. So never mind.
That's where it's at.
How do the IPAs work for you on the river, though? Do you find that gives you acid reflux?
Hops will make you lose. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah. Well, just to make sure that I was clear on what I was meaning by training low, I'm not changing my diet. My diet is still a carb-based diet. I just happen to start a training session when I'm in a fasted state after either fasting overnight or doing a workout to burn muscle glycogen and then doing a second workout later in the day without having replenished that. So I'm certainly not looking at like a keto diet or anything like that. I'm eating a normal diet for an endurance athlete that is carb based.
Is it intermittent fasting? Like you stop eating at what time?
It would be, I have dinner and then I don't eat again. And I wake up in the morning and I go for a run or I go for a paddle. So it's not even more than a typical fast. It's just, when you have slightly low muscle glycogen. Does that make sense, Alma?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So it really isn't, I don't do any keto based diet or low carb diet. It's a regular diet. And I just happen to try to do some training when I'm in a low glycogen state as a result of normal fasting.
All right.
So
go ahead, Alma.
I think just to be clear, because we've been talking about fat burning, it's just to be clear about what the bottom line, if I may, what's happening here is that we need to make sure that keep low fat diets are, high fat diets and ketosis is not the way to train for these events at all.
100% agreed. Yeah.
So.
All right. And I want to bring up a question about self-supported nutrition. Now, we've talked about liquid diets and all of that. And of course, carrying enough liquid with you is going to be quite difficult. So what would you recommend? You know, if someone's self-supported, they don't have a ground crew out there, how can they handle some of that?
I can talk about that from there's water now available. The very first 340, I literally had to carry what I thought was going to be enough fluids. And it turned out there was some tricks around that later in the race, but couldn't count on it. Now there's water pretty much available. And I'd hate to say that and somebody was counting on every checkpoint having water, but you typically can get water even if you're self-supported. So you could carry Ziploc bags with your carbohydrate-rich powder formula easily for the whole race, and you just dump it into the water and resupply your container, your hydration container, however it is. So I guess my point is if you're unless you're, you know, you have the water is the main issue in terms of weight and excess bulk in your boat. Nowadays with the 340, I don't think that's a problem. You can get water. So then you just have to plan on how do I deal with, you know, drink mix, etc. And that's pretty straight.
And cleaning the bottles, since some of those drink mixes go off.
Yeah, we have a story about that. I'll keep it. I don't want to. We had a situation where our container wasn't cleaned out correctly and it fermented. And one, we couldn't drink it because it was disgusting. Two, we were probably dealing with flavor fatigue at that point in time. But it put a panic moment for us, and we actually had to pull over at Cooper's just to get water, because what was in our hydration flask, we were not going to drink that. So, you know, and we knew that we couldn't stop drinking. So we had to pull over and just scramble to get a replacement at that time. So, you know, I don't think you were kidding, but it's actually a really big deal. Some level of food prep hygiene is really important here, especially on the drink containers.
No, I was serious, because I know some of the drinks like Infinite and Spiz and some of those that contain milk proteins and different proteins go off and they start tasting sour. And I couldn't imagine putting a dirty bottle, you know, refilling the same dirty bottle and not ending up with some real problems. Jeremy, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of how particular you are with your nutrition plan, and in this case, I mentioned earlier, it's really about making sure things don't go wrong. You know, a long-term race like this is about making sure things don't go wrong. So I actually bring my own water. I bring gallon jugs. I have these, you know, Lexan gallon jugs, and I bring my well water from home. And that is what my ground crew uses to make my drinks and to make in the MR340 my soup, because I know that water is good and I don't have any issues with it and it doesn't bother me. Whereas I went to Fresno. My wife and I moved to Fresno for a little while, and we were both sick for the first 6 months we lived in Fresno and couldn't figure out why. And it was the tap water, and we got filters and we were okay. I don't want to risk having bum water from, you know, some public boat launch that some guy, you know, used the hose to rinse out his RV septic tank or something. So I bring my own water. That might be a little too persnickety, but I'm that particular.
Same thing. I'll bring gallon jugs of water, and so we are ready. So we don't have to run out of water or not find it, or like you say, you find strange water.
Yeah.
Just eliminating all the possibilities of going wrong is really where it's at, I think, in my head.
Yeah.
I think, Jeremy, your idea of the what was it, Perpetuum in the small bottle, it's, you know, single serve sort of thing with the cork might be a great suggestion if you're self-supported, thinking along those lines.
Yeah. And in this case, you know, we had our ground crew put the scoop was already in there. I prepped all the bottles and had the scoop Perpetuum, but they just filled them up to a mark of tape that I had on the neck, and then they'd cap it and hand it off, and I'd shake it before I took it and then drink it. But you could also leave it dry. You know, if you know you're going to have long stretches between, you know, between water stops or whatever, between drops, you could just leave it dry and add water in the boat. Absolutely.
And I've got something similar here. This is my own mix. If you add Spiz and instant coffee, it still tastes horrible, but I call it Spaz. And I just throw it in these old single serve milk containers. And then the idea is throw it into a water bottle while you're out there, and then flip out water bottles with the ground crew so they can clean them out and get it done. But that's another possibility. But the cork is a nice idea because then my hands don't have to function. I can use my teeth.
Right.
And I've only broken one of those during the race, so I don't think it can happen twice.
One tooth?
Yeah, at Lexington, under the bridge, I broke a tooth in half, one of my wisdom teeth, on a Cliffs bar. So I still can't eat bars during the race.
Wow.
And I spit into the water, and I was sitting there texting my ground crew going, I need scope. I need Listerine at every checkpoint so I can rinse it out and not die of some crazy infection.
Actually,
so
Chris,
the lesson to your kids is go to the dentist before going to the 340.
Little JB Weld in there, you're all set.
You know, speaking of like what you might take in and die in those, we probably ought to talk about people who wonder if they can filter the water out of the river. And the water in the river is not, the Missouri River is no more polluted than any other body of water that you would point to. In fact, Lake of the Ozarks has worse water quality numbers than most of the Missouri, but the sediment load is intense. And so you just can't do it. There's no filter that's going to work. The only way expedition paddlers do it is they put it in a bucket, let all the sediment come out, and then pull off the top phase. But anyway, just wanted to cover that because every year there's at least the question, and there has been some failed attempts to filter the river water. You can't do it. It won't work. It's too much sediment.
Yeah. And as we're getting towards the end here, what I want to do is give everyone about a minute to cover anything that they haven't covered that they think is important. Let's start with Ozzy.
What comes to mind is in my food bag, in my gallon food bag, is each individual food in a small Ziploc bag so that I can pull that out and I don't have to touch it. I literally eat like a horse out of a bag. So I don't have to touch it. So I don't contaminate it with any Missouri bacteria as I go. Again, to avoid getting sick, getting anything funky. But train with what you're going to race with and do it often and don't skimp on that. Keep it simple.
I want to just touch on something Ozzy said real quick. If river water touches the food, as a rule, don't eat the food.
Yep.
There's just too much risk. Even a clean body of water has protozoa, has all sorts of things in there that could be problematic. So keep that in mind. Jeremy.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna, because it's a perfect segue to that, Jeremy, and then I'm done. My only tip is that exactly what you guys are talking about. When you drop something in the bottom of the boat, if you've never done this race before, you need to look up the word bilge water and begin to understand how disgusting the bottom of the boat is going to be. So you do need to figure out some little tray that you can kind of, or some system that you can keep your food where it's not falling in the bottom of the boat, because if it does, then you're never, just wait till you do the race. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
No, the water in the bottom of my boat is far dirtier than any Missouri River water could ever be. Absolutely. No, I agree with what I think Bryan and Alma are going to say. I agree with what Ozzy just said. It's all about practicing ahead of time. It's all about knowing before you get there what works for you and what doesn't. And the only way to do that is to train well in advance. Remember that just the way you train every other system in your body to be able to paddle 340 miles, you've got to train your gut. You've got to train for the nutrition. You've got to prepare for the foods. And you don't want there to be any unknowns, because it's about making sure that things don't go wrong. And the way to do that is to practice. And I'll throw in one more plug for finding a great coach or a great nutritionist who can help you, because there are people that make their livings, their whole lives are based around this. We have one of them on this call, and they're available to help us. And it's, we would hire someone to help us learn to ski, or we'd hire someone to, help us learn to skydive or whatever. We might as well take the time, if we're invested in a race like this, hire somebody to help you figure this stuff out too.
And I will get to the Hopkins in a second. A question just popped up from Peter. How do you balance weight loss versus training nutrition? He's at 195, 5'10", planning to do stand-up paddleboard. He's trying to get down to 165 or 170 by race time. Alma, I think that's right up your alley.
Sure. Actually, take advantage that you are going to be training for this race, because a lot of people need that physical activity to help with the get to your goal. So that, and I would say it doesn't hurt, especially the early part of the season, to you know, have a lower calorie diet, but I don't mean like crazy. Yeah, you can restrict your calories, and I'll be happy to work with you if you need some help. But it's possible. And a lot of people actually just lose weight just because of this event. And if nothing else, just think about how many calories you burn by the end of the race. It kicks you off to a new level of transformation. You're ready. You started it, and you're moving on to bigger, better things after this. And so it takes planning, and, you know, I'm happy to help you if that's what you need.
All right. And then Hopkins. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think you've heard, especially if this is your first race, so you probably heard a lot of tips, a lot of great advice. So if you are needing a resource, the notes that Jeremy provided, of actual sample what he ate, will help you. And also my 3-page simplified in a snap guidelines for training for this race will help you. And for those of you who actually need more and you're interested because you want to be just as competitive as these people on the panel, so this is a wonderful source, Endurance Sports Nutrition, by registered dietitian Suzanne Eberly, Gerard Everly, that is. And I do cite that in my handout. So I think she's now on her 3rd edition. This is the 2nd edition. So you can find that on Amazon. It's shipped to you in a matter of days. So there's a little bit of everything for everybody.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you, panel, for the hard work, for getting together on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. I will be posting this on the 340 Paddler YouTube channel. I will include a link to Alma's handout. I will include Jeremy's diet plan, or Jeremy's nutrition plan for the race. Thank you.
Yep.
I will include a link to that, and that should take care of it. The next session will actually be on a Monday to avoid training problems. So our next session will be on primarily health, but we may also deal with some hydration on Monday, April 19th at 6:30 p.m. I don't have the panelists laid out yet, but we will have that sorted out very shortly here. If you happen to be a doctor or nurse in the 340, let me know, because it would be fantastic. Tom Sleva, I'm looking at you, even though you aren't looking back, because you're probably at work. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. And as always, keep your paddle in the water.